Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Pocket. This is actually my second attempt at recording this video because, of course, the first time I did it, my microphone wasn't plugged in. So we're here on Pokemon Zone looking at, again, the tier list of decks in Pokemon Pocket. And what I want to do is talk about this Lapras Ex card. So I, like everybody else, love to deck build, love to do all that. Play the deck, see what they look like, but I also like to overanalyze because I'm a huge nerd, as you guys saw from my spreadsheet the other day. So I figured the event was super easy. I've already got 4 copies of the Lapras, as well as I think a minimum of 3 copies of like every other card. So I'm not sure what the event's gonna be like, if there's gonna be like anything to come with it, like if you need extra copies for stuff, or if it was just meant to be like a fun event to get you a card. With that, I don't know how good this Lapras EX card is going to be. I know a lot of people who have seen it, seen the damage, are like, yeah, I want to run that deck. I don't know where it's going to fit in, and so we're going to break it down today against the other decks in the competitive format and kind of see where it stands. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on it. Let me know where you think Lapras EX ends up. I'll give you my opinion. So it's either top tier, high tier, middle tier, or low tier. Promising tier is usually just they're not there forever. It's just while we don't know a lot about it. So Melmetal could be good. We don't know. Low tier, and then untiered is like the lowest. Like these aren't good. They're just experimental. I don't think Gengar is that bad. I don't know why this website has it so low. It's probably just because it's stage 2 Pokemon, but not letting your opponent play supporter cards is massive. Anyway, we are going to compare this Lapras EX against the other decks in the competitive format and see where it ends up. So let's hop in with the 2 top tier decks. Let's start with Pikachu. So this is the suggested deck list, of course. And the biggest thing with Pikachu versus Lapras is fast versus slow. Pikachu is meant to get out there in the active spot, fill your bench, 90 damage turn 2, or turn 3 if you have to go first, unfortunately. But you're swinging for 90 damage. You are killing a Lapras in 2 turns, if the Lapras can, the problem with Lapras is you're doing 90, so then it goes down to 50. So you're healing 20, it'll go back up to 70. Then you can do another potion for 90 and another potion for 110. But the problem is Lapras is then weak to lightning. So Pikachu Circle Circuit is going to hit for 110 damage if the bench is full. So one thing to think of. It's just unfortunate. It's one thing to think about. Lapras EX, of course, would kill a Pikachu EX in 2 turns. It just depends with the Lapras EX. Can you get a Misty out? Do you have a Misty in your hand that you can play? Power this thing up immediately. Pikachu EX, of course, would get to attack first. Unless it's just a straight back and forth and the Pikachu EX deck had to go first. But Pikachu also, the Pikachu EX deck also has better ways of getting your Pokemon out of the active spot because they aren't big. They have low retreat cost. Pikachu EX a 1, Zapdos EX has a 1, Voltorb has a 1, and Electrode has a 0. So it just makes it easier in a Pikachu EX deck if you don't get the right starting hand to be able to move around. Whereas if you get Lapras as your only basic Pokemon in your starting hand, you're pretty much hoping for a Misty as well so that you can power it up immediately. I think it's going to be really tough. Pikachu EX is already the best deck in the game. I think it is better than Mewtwo. I think it is up and away the best deck in this game. That's not to say it wins 100% of the time because, again, this game is RNG based on what you get in your hand. But with Pikachu EX already being extremely strong, meaning it's going to be a deck that you see if you want to play in a lot of tournaments, it's probably going to be a deck that you see a lot when they release ranked in this game. It's just going to be tough for Lapras being weak to Lightning, and Lightning being the Pikachu EX deck being extremely fast. So he's not going to beat the Pikachu deck. And then the Mewtwo deck. Now, Mewtwo is interesting because I feel like a lot of the times when you see a Mewtwo EX deck lose, it is either against a Pikachu deck because the Pikachu deck just set up quicker, or B, it just couldn't get Gardevoir out there to attach an extra psychic energy to it. So not only do you have to have Gardevoir out there, you have to have Mewtwo in your active spot. Otherwise, the psychic energy will just get attached to Gardevoir. So there's a couple little maneuvers you have to do with Mewtwo EX that you wouldn't have to do with Lapras, which will make Lapras a simpler card. But again, with Bubble Drain, you are able to two-shot a Mewtwo. You know, granted, they don't heal with 2 potions, but you could do 160 damage with Giovanni, ensure that you kill it. The problem is that if they have a Mewtwo in the active spot and you can't get energy on your Lapras fast enough with a Misty, it is going to power up Side Drive and no matter what, knock you out in 1 turn. And the big problem with that is that Lapras EX is a slow deck, and Lapras EX, the card, gives your opponent 2 prize cards when they knock it out. So it's tough to get like 2 Lapras set up. I don't know how you could make this card your main attacker and then go into a tournament where you're going to be playing either Pikachu, who's going to hit you really quickly for, lightning damage, which you're weak to, or Mewtwo EX, who you might feel good when you start the game because you're both moving slowly, but as soon as Gardevoir comes into play, or even as soon as Mewtwo EX gets, the 4 energy that it needs to use Side Drive, that's it. So unfortunately, I'm not putting it in top tier decks. I don't think it really stands much of a chance against Pikachu or Mewtwo. Again, if you are free to play and you're struggling getting the packs, and you just, I recognize that I was very lucky to be able to build a Pikachu deck because now I'm trying to build a Mewtwo deck and I can't get a Curly or a Ralts. I can't get a Curlia or a Gardevoir. So I get it. If you weren't lucky enough to build a deck, or maybe you weren't into deck building when the game came out, so you opened a bunch of different packs and didn't get, enough cards for a good deck, maybe this Lapras EX is tantalizing just because it's easy to get, but I don't think it's going to end up in top tier. So we move down here. We're not going to go through all these. I think we're going to go through top tier, high tier, and then I'll show you guys a couple of the middle tier decks and how they work. So the next one is, of course, Charizard. Charizard's kind of the same thing as Mewtwo. It's a little more difficult to get out there because you can't just use a Pokemon's ability to power it up. You actually have to use another Pokemon's move, meaning you have to put Moltres in the active spot, use Inferno Dance, power up your Charizard, and then get Moltres out of the active spot for Charizard. It's not the toughest thing to do. You've got X speeds, but just a little bit to play around with more than Mewtwo. But again, once you get Charizard powered up, Crimson Storm, 200 damage. It's taking out any Pokemon in the game. There is no Pokemon with 200 HP. So that move one-shots any Pokemon in the game. So not so much a negative to Lapras specifically, just something to think about. Especially because if you want to enter tournaments, or even if you want to play online, you're going to be playing against a lot of Pikachus. You're going to be playing against a lot of Mewtwo's because those are widely considered the 2 best decks in the game. And then you're going to be playing a lot of Charizards because it's a lot of people's favorite Pokemon, and it's a fire Pokemon, and it's cool, and so a lot of people play it. And so Lapras is the good thing. The good thing with Lapras that is, I guess, a little bit different. Pikachu can 2-shot a Charizard, but Lapras, because Charizard is weak to Lapras, weak to water, every Bubble Drain will do 100 damage, meaning, 2 Bubble Drains, 200 damage. Can you get your Lapras EX online fast enough to take out the Charizard? My guess would be probably not, because if they have a Charizard... Now, again, if you, have a Sabrina, things can happen. But if they have a Charizard willingly in their active spot, it probably means it's pretty close to being able to use Crimson Storm. And probably isn't at risk of being one-shot. So your best bet here is probably like a Misty of some sort. Maybe like early in the game, they only have like Moltres and say Charmeleon on the bench. So you use Sabrina and you bring in the Charmeleon and knock it out so that they can't evolve it. Which again, if you do that, that's great, because then you've wasted, not only do they only have one more Charmander and Charmeleon that they can play to possibly get a Charizard on the board, they also wasted those turns presumably putting energy on Charmander and Charmeleon, because you need to power up those Pokemon before you get to Charizard, because then you still have to wait, minimum 2 turns with Inferno Dance from Moltres. So overall, it would be interesting. I think out of all of the high tier and the 2 top tier decks, I think you're probably in the best situation against Charizard, because he's weak to you. You can 2-shot it. Obviously, you're still hoping for a Misty. You don't really want to get caught in a position where you guys are trading energies back and forth once per turn, especially because they also have a Moltres. So if their Moltres is out there, they're getting energy too. So it'll be interesting. I think Lapras has the biggest chance coming up against Charizard decks. Could be decent in the meta because, Charizard is played quite frequently. But as we'll see in just a minute, I just think there's better water Pokemon that can be used over a Lapras EX. That being said, Starmie EX with Articuno. The big thing about Starmie EX, so the big upside and why I think people are excited about Lapras is that it's a basic Pokemon, but so is Articuno. They both have 140 HP, and Articuno, they both take 3 energy. They both do 80 damage, and I mean, depending on what you want, like, yes, it's nice that Lapras heals 20 damage from itself, but Articuno's Blizzard does 10 damage to each of the opponent's benched Pokemon, so that is 110 damage if the opponent has 3 benched Pokemon, which I think just off the rip is a better card. But then you also have Starmie, which again, the upside to Lapras here is that it's basic. So you can draw a Lapras from Pokeballs. You can't draw a Starmie from Pokeballs. So if it's just one of those games where the Starmie is at the bottom of your deck, it can be very, very difficult to get to, and it can be very, very difficult to win. That's obviously why Articuno is in this deck, but I just think even if you were like, oh, should I run a Starmie Lapras deck? I would probably still stick to Starmie Articuno. But if you are a huge Lapras fan and just want to have Lapras for, to say, oh, I want a tournament and Lapras was in my deck, I don't think it's like a huge downgrade over Articuno. You just won't be able to do that 10 energy or that 10 damage to each of the opponent's bench Pokemon if they have any. So I think this is still better. I think Starmie Greninja is still probably better. Although I wouldn't run Starmie Greninja because Greninja is stage 2 and all you're doing is 20 damage from its ability. Like, you're not really here to power it up. Like, you could. They're both pretty low energy Pokemon, so it's no big deal there. But overall, I just think Starmie is probably still the best water Pokemon in the game. Again, Starmie's one downside, it's not basic. You can't draw it with a Pokeball. Can be tough to get to, but for the most part, in these small 20 card decks where you have 2 Professor's Research to get 4 cards and then 2 Pokeballs, which even though you can't draw Starmie, you're getting 2 cards just kind of out of your deck, out of the way. I think Starmie's the better water card. We'll come back to Venusaur. Marowak is kind of the same thing. The only reason Marowak is in high tier is because it can do 160 damage in 1 turn. The problem is that it takes a coin flip. So it just depends. Marowak would be really, really tough going up against a Lapras. Like, your only hope, again, would be that the opponent can't get Marowak out there because it's at the bottom of the deck and they just can't draw it. But you're only able to do 80 damage. Now, I will say, if you can get there fast enough to do a Bubble Drain, you one-shot Cubone. So you can keep them from being able to play Marowak. So if you play Lapras early and then miss the coin flip, and you're able to get there. But once Marowak EX is out there, it's scary because it takes 2 shots from your Lapras to kill, which means it's getting off at least 1 boomerang. And that means that even if you are the first to go, even if you're the first to attack, you're doing 80 damage, there's a chance that you don't get to attack again because Marowak can take you out. And that can be tough to play around, especially because once Marowak's out there, it's kind of just out there. Like, obviously you can Sabrina play around it, but it's not like Mewtwo where you can maybe cut off the Ralts line and keep it from getting its energy. It only takes 2 energy, and then it can kind of just sweep. So obviously you'd have to be unlucky to get swept over and over by Marowak, but it's tough. I think Marowak's probably the second best, hope out here. If you were playing online with Lapras, running into these different decks. But I still would rather play Marowak. And then we hop over here to Venusaur. Biggest thing about Venusaur is the fact that even with 2 Giovannis, you are max doing 180 damage. That does not knock out a Venusaur. Venusaur takes 3 turns. Now, that's not a huge problem because Venusaur is a tank. It can live through a lot. Most EX Pokemon can 2-shot it, at least with Giovanni. So having a Lapras that can't even 2-shot it if you have a Giovanni on back-to-back turns is crazy. So it's just tough because then you also, in this deck, you have Erica. So with these 2 Pokemon being healing Pokemon, you are essentially getting, if you're just thinking about it, a Lapras EX and a Venusaur EX are both in the active spot, right? You are, let's say they're both powered up. Maybe you get a turn earlier, but it's not going to matter because it's going to take the Venusaur 3 turns. So the main problem is, like, it takes you 3 turns, and then they're going to do 100 damage to your 80. So they're out damaging you. They're also healing 30 damage to your 20. So they're out healing you. They already have more HP. And your Bubble Drain, remember that little number 80 down there? Well, with the heal 30 damage and an Erica, they have eliminated the damage that you have done from that Bubble Drain, assuming you didn't have a Giovanni. So it's just sort of like they can waste your turns that way. And again, it's not a super big deal because that's what Venusaur is kind of meant to do. Whoever it's playing, it's meant to be slow, ramped. You're not supposed to take it out super quickly. So your best bet on this one too is, kill the Bulbasaur, get the Lapras out there with a Misty, kill the Bulbasaur, kill, an Ivysaur with a Giovanni or something like that. But if a Venusaur EX deck and a Lapras EX deck are going up against each other and the other deck gets a Venusaur EX deck out, I don't see a lot of times where you would be able to come back from that as the Lapras player. I just don't think this deck quite ends up in high tier. Now, it might. The reason I'll tell you guys where I'm split. I'm split on middle tier and low tier. I think Lapras could, maybe end up in the low to middle tier right here, simply because Charizard is one of the best decks in the game, and Lapras could be a good counter if you play it correctly. Although it's really hard to counter Charizard because it can one-shot anything. So down here in the middle tier, you have Blastoise. I won't go too deeply into Blastoise. It's a little bit different because Blastoise does need a lot of energy, but again, that's where Misty comes in. And Blastoise is doing 160 damage if you have 5 energy attached to it. So it's doing double the damage for only, a couple more energy. And assuming you have a Misty or 2, that couple more energy, you're kind of hoping doesn't take an extra turn, compared to what the Lapras would. So you're doing 160 damage, which, by the way, would be 180 against Charizard and would one-shot Charizard. So it's just one of those things. It's where I don't think Lapras is even as good as Charizard. You are doing 40 damage for 2 energy, so you're attacking a turn earlier, assuming a Misty's not involved, doing 40 damage, and then the next turn, at the very least, you're doing 100, So it's just, even, the Hydro Bazooka, it does 100 damage with 3 energies, so it's the same as this Lapras, but again, the big difference, Blastoise stage 2, Lapras basic, so you can pull Lapras with Pokeballs, be almost guaranteed to put him out there and then start powering him up. I just personally, I think Blastoise EX is a better card, especially if you play decks right. You can Sabrina, right? Sabrina is one of the best supporters in the game because it makes your opponent put one of their bench Pokemon in the active spot. But if you put down at least 2 bench Pokemon, then you kind of have Sabrina protection to put whichever Pokemon you want in the active spot. So it's very interesting. I think Blastoise is a better deck. And then we've got stuff. So 18 trainers, it'll be very interesting because Articuno seems to work well in the 18 trainer, and not like great, right? These are middle tier decks, but they do okay online. And Zapdos. So Articuno, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the Starmie deck. It does 80 damage, the same as Lapras with the same amount of energy, except for it also does an extra 30. So it's just, you're either doing extra 30 to the bench Pokemon of the other team with Articuno, or you're healing 20 from yourself with Lapras. I'm not big on moves that heal you, because if you're like trying to hit the other Pokemon first because you both 2-shot each other, then a healing move doesn't help because your HP is full. So I'd rather have a Pokemon that does damage. I think Articuno is better. Zapdos, of course, it does the 20 damage for 1 energy, and then a couple turns later you can do up to 200 damage. Like, the Zapdos can one-shot every card in the game if you obviously if you flip coins right. So Lapras you could shove into an 18 trainer deck. I don't know how well it would do. It'd be very interesting to see, but I don't think a Lapras 18 trainer deck would work. And then you run into Alakazam, where it's basically this Alakazam card, the more energies that your Pokemon has attached to it, or the other Pokemon has attached, the more damage it does. And the reason Lapras is such a big problem is, if you do the math, Psychic does 60 damage no matter what, and your Lapras is going to have 3 energy on it, assuming it's in the active spot. That's how many you want to do, the 80 damage. So 60 plus 30 is 90, plus 30 is 120, plus another 30 is 150. So assuming your Lapras is all powered up in the active spot, Alakazam one-shots it. Not even an EX card, and it one-shots it. Now, Alakazam has been used as sort of like, I don't want to call it meta breaking because it's not that good. It's a stage 2, but it can one-shot. It can't really one-shot Mewtwo and Charizard. It's really hard under circumstances because those Pokemon have moves that discard energy after you use them. But a lot of the other Pokemon it can one-shot because you're doing 60 plus at least another 60 because most EX have at least 2, so that's 120. So it one-shots Pikachu EX. It one-shots Starmie. I believe it one-shots Starmie. No, it does not one-shot Starmie. It would one-shot Starmie with a Giovanni. So, but it one-shots Lapras, assuming your Lapras is all powered up, which is unfortunate. So I just can't really use it against an Alakazam deck. You could, again, here's the thing. If you roll a Misty with this card, it's like the Articuno, and it 2-shots this Alakazam. It probably one-shots most. Does it one-shot Kadabra? I can't remember if Kadabra has 80 or 90 HP. But you could probably one-shot a Kadabra with a Giovanni at the very least. And so you could take the line out before it even gets to Alakazam if you have like a Misty, but it's still slow. Alakazam can one-shot it if it's powered up. Alakazam's probably a better card. And then, of course, you've got things like the Koga. Blaine, it's probably better than Blaine just simply because it's a water deck. So it's going to... I don't think any of the cards that Blaine attaches to one-shots. I think Ninetales does 90. Plus the 30 for Blaine, which would be 120. So I don't think there's any of those cards that one-shots Lapras. And I believe Lapras would one-shot like anything you would use in a Blaine deck, like the maybe not the Arcanine, but what is Blaine attached to here? I don't use Blaine. Ninetales, Rapidash, or Magmar, so not Arcanine. That's probably why Arcanine's such a dead card. Anyway, yeah, so you Ninetales, Rapidash, Magmar, none of which I think they're all. Don't quote me on that, but I think they're all weak to water. Well, Ninetales and Rapidash are. I'm assuming Magmar is as well because he's fire. So he would kill. He kills one-shots those Pokemon because he's water. So Lapras probably is better than a Blaine deck. And then you have a deck like Koga. This one would just depend. Koga is meant on poisoning you and then doing a bunch of damage with Muck, returning him to your hand. So I think Lapras and Koga could go back and forth. It would just depend on who's drawing better. Is the Lapras deck getting the Misty that it needs? Is the Koga deck getting the Koga and the Pokemon that it needs? So overall, I think that Lapras EX ends up right here in lower middle tier. I think it can hang with a lot of these decks, except for maybe like Blastoise is interesting. I think Blastoise is so low because it's stage 2, but and it takes 5 energy to do its big attack, but unlike Charizard, it doesn't discard, so it's interesting. But I think Lapras sits maybe right in here. Maybe it falls down to the low tier deck. Maybe, but we'll see. I think it's somewhere in the middle between mid and low. I don't think this is anything game breaking. I don't think it's going to be the new meta. I think Pikachu is still up there. But overall, I had fun getting this card. It was relatively simple. And I'm looking forward to using it. I'm going to use it. I'm going to build a deck and maybe upload a video tomorrow. After the video you guys will be seeing in the morning. And we'll see if it's good. But no, other than that, I had fun getting it. It's a cool card. I think it'll be used online, but probably not used too much in competitive tournaments. But that's all I have on the Lapras card. I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.